Tak, ale to rzeczywiście specyficzny moment.
This is really a very specific moment in time, because we now have a new US president, but at the same time a very familiar one. President Trump has won the presidential election for the second time non-consecutively, which makes this a unique situation in the history of the United States, in that his two terms were interrupted by that of Joe Biden's. So in that sense, European and global leaders already know Donald Trump from his first 4 years as president, and so therefore many already have some idea of what his policies will be like, as do I myself. That's why I'm patiently awaiting his first decisions and policies which may affect areas that I deal with as President of the Polish Republic. His first announcements obviously pertain to domestic US policies, so now I'm waiting on what he has to say regarding the Euro-Atlantic, or let's say European spheres of interest.
Poland spends more money than any other nation on its defence as a percentage of GDP, which gives Poland a degree of immunity from US criticism. But do you believe that US Donald Trump criticism of NATO, of European allies, is still fair, given the fact that actually European partners have been spending a lot more on defence over the last 2 years?
To dobrze, że nasi sojusznicy
It's great that most of our allies are spending 2% on defence, but don't forget this was decided on at the NATO summit in Newport, Wales, back in 2014. That's 11 years ago. It's taken some countries those 11 years to get to 2%. But in the meantime, the security situation in Europe, and especially in Poland's orbit, has drastically changed due to the return of de facto Russian imperialism. Russia attacked Ukraine and today occupies a vast part of its territory. Russia remains the aggressor, and the war there continues. For those of us who have historical experience of Russian imperialism, it's clear that it won't be halted in Ukraine if Russia prevails. It will keep going. It may continue to attack Ukraine, or it could hit other countries. Therefore, today it's paramount that we actually return back to Cold War-era defence expenditure policies, whether we like it or not. It's intrinsically the same thing, Soviet imperialism and Putin's version. It's about expansionism, gaining territory, dominating other countries, and enlarging the Russian sphere of influence. So today, if we want to defend against this, and us Poles decisively do, we'll be spending close to 5% of GDP on defence this year. We're aware that we have to modernise our armed forces. We have to be strong and provide a real deterrent to keep Russian aggression at bay. We believe our NATO allies should follow suit in solidarity. Back in March 2024, I proposed to the then US President Joe Biden to raise the threshold for NATO defence spending to 3% of GDP.
But sir, if getting to 2% didn't stop Russian aggression and Putin's adventurism, why will 3% make a difference? Why will 4% make a difference? Or, as the US President has talked about, 5% even?
To nie procenty odstraszą Rosję.
Percentages themselves won't scare off Russia, but it's how we use them. If we do indeed use the money, which constitutes these percentages, to build up our military resistance, we'll be able to repel any attack. That's what it's about. NATO is a defence alliance. It doesn't attack others. NATO wants to be prepared for any attack, at any time and anywhere, to protect any country that's being attacked. I believe that if this money is properly put to use, that we at least build ammunition factories, which all leaders are saying are massively lacking today, that we supply our armies with modern equipment, then we'll be able to defeat the Russian aggressor. We're seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine what happens when their heroic army is properly equipped to defend their country. I believe that if NATO members step up to the plate and they succeed in universally modernising their armed forces with that 3% of GDP, at least then they'll be able to attain such defence capabilities as to render any Russian attacks futile.
And finally, on European defence, what's your message to Giorgia Meloni? What's your message to Pedro Sanchez, who are prime ministers of huge countries who are failing to even now get to 2% of GDP?
Wystarczy spojrzeć na to, co dzieje się na Ukrainie. Jeżeli ktoś myśli, że
Just look at what's happening in Ukraine. If someone thinks their country may be safe from Russian invasion, then let them remember just how far Russia has gone throughout history. For example, when fighting Napoleon, they were even in Paris, having crossed half of the European continent. So if Russia has a large enough military potential, which isn't stopped in its tracks with a robust defence, then it will just keep on attacking, as Russian imperialism is insatiable.
Let us turn directly to Ukraine, sir. Unfortunately, in the years that you and I have been speaking over the last 2 years plus, The war has gone on. It is a stalemate in the south. It's a stalemate in the east as well. It appears that neither Russia nor Ukraine can win the war at the moment as well. With the new presidency in the States as well, do you see a swifter end to this conflict through peace and negotiations, or are we going to live in this frozen conflict for more years to come?
Kampania wyborcza w Stanach Zjednoczonych się zakończyła. Przechodzimy.
The US election campaign is now over, and we're moving towards governing and fulfilling pre-election promises. We should take Donald Trump seriously when he clearly said that he would ensure the end of Russian aggression in Ukraine. I say Russia must not win this war. Ending Russian aggression has to mean it doesn't win. I'm not saying Ukraine must defeat Russia. There's no chance of Ukrainian victory parade in Red Square. Obviously not. Nobody wants to attack Russia. We have to restore order and the primacy of international law, which Russia violated and continues to violate through its aggression and occupation of Ukrainian land. Russia must be repelled, and that's our priority. We're saying now that neither side can win outright, so we have to support Ukraine as much as possible, so that Russia is unable to defeat it, so that Ukraine can drive out the Russian army from as much of its occupied territory as possible. And then, however, we need to strike a peace agreement, which is a tall order in the near future, and a massive responsibility of the US president, as head of the world's most powerful military, as well as of the free world. I stress once again, Ukraine must be a party to all peace talks.
But if peace talks are based on the premise of land that is held now by Russia stays under Russian control, does that represent a Russian victory in this war?
Wszystko zależy od tego, jakie ostatecznie będą.
It all ultimately depends on the final terms of the agreement. It's not for me to decide these terms for Ukraine. As I said, Ukraine has to be party to the agreement and to these peace talks. We have to reach a solution where we can say objectively that Russia attempted to take a very large part of Ukraine but failed, so therefore did not win this war.
Do you see a fast track possible for Ukraine to be in either NATO or the EU or both?
Dyskutuje się w kontekście NATO przede wszystkim jedną kwestię.
With regards to NATO, one issue is specifically being discussed, which is that Ukraine must ultimately receive security guarantees. Indeed, real security assurances from NATO, which the US, with the world's most powerful military, leads, is, let's not kid ourselves, actual NATO membership, with all the collective defence guarantees found in Article 5. That's the real security guarantee. As president of a country that directly borders Ukraine, that took in millions of Ukrainians fleeing Russian aggression, war, rape and murder, I feel I can say that Ukraine should be invited to join NATO as soon as possible. As a neighbour of Ukraine's, I feel entitled to request this from my NATO allies. This would be a very important political gesture, proving the alliance is open to Ukraine, and this would trigger the ratification process. This can obviously take a while, but at least we can then navigate a political roadmap. It's so important we take this very significant step. And I repeat once again, those security guarantees can come in various forms. The strongest warranty yet is indeed full NATO membership and protection through Article 5.